Good evening, everybody. This is Rob and Jordan. We are back for Archangel Inc. Live number 47. How are you today, Jordan?
I'm great. We're up 47. I'm happy to be here. Let's do this.
I know, yeah. Cool. So the topic for tonight is Audacity for audiobooks, your getting started guide. So there's a lot going on when it comes to audiobook production. There are people who spend their entire careers doing this. And so we're going to cover a bunch of different things. If we happen to gloss over some things, definitely feel free to leave some comments for clarification. If you're on the live stream or afterward, we'll try and address them. But I did want to provide kind of a big picture overview of what this process is like, and then provide some additional resources on how to create your own audiobook if that's something that you're interested in, because it is a question that we get from time to time. Hey, what do you recommend? Are there any good applications, or what sort of equipment and so forth? So that's the spirit behind this video. Any thoughts as we get started here, Jordan?
No, I think it's smart to, as an author, to kind of see what your options are. Watching this video and seeing what it takes to get an audiobook done is going to help you decide, okay, yeah, do I want to do an audiobook? Do I want to do it myself? Do I want to let someone else handle this? I think it's important just for a little bit of knowledge there, because there are tools out there and there are ways to do it. So yeah, I'm excited to dig into that a little bit today.
Awesome, cool. Yeah, let's jump right in, because again, I think we'll try and keep this short. We keep saying that, but there might be enough to go on for a little bit more if there is interest, but we'll see. So moving forward, getting started. So this, again, the spirit of this is creating an audiobook using Audacity as the application of choice, and we'll talk about different elements that go into the recording, the editing, the mastering, and then where to actually make those audiobooks available. And we'll start off here, recommended equipment. So you don't need a whole ton to get started. Obviously, Audacity is the application that we're going to be discussing tonight. It is a free and cross-platform application. So if you are on Mac or Windows, I believe they even have a Linux version available. You should have access to this application. There are some other sound recording applications such as GarageBand, or I think Pro Tools, is that right? That are available on individual platforms, but this is a nice cross-platform one, and again, it is totally free, so there is that advantage as well. Any thoughts about the about Audacity in broad scale, Jordan?
No, I mean, for me, it's pretty easy and intuitive program to use. I'm not necessarily great with programs like that. Sometimes it can be very overwhelming to me, especially like some other audio editing programs, some video editing programs. At least for me, I look at it, I'm like, oh, that seems like way too much. For Audacity, for whatever reason, is very easy to use and very simple, and it comes across as it does what it needs to do. It has a lot of options, but it's not super complicated to get started.
Yep, I agree. It is actually a very robust tool. There are a lot of features to it, but it is approachable. It is something that I was able to learn myself with some online guidance, but it isn't something that you necessarily need to go to audio engineering school to become at least competent enough for our purposes. So
yep, and you taught me how to use it way back when, and I just remember learning more from you on that. And it was like, okay, this makes sense. Like that makes sense. That does that, and that does that. So yeah, it's definitely a tool you can learn to use.
Absolutely. And the goal at the end of this live stream here, at the end of this video recording, will be that the viewers out there, if they've never experienced Audacity before, we'll go through a screen share in a bit here. We'll have a sense, and they say, okay, I know what I can do to kind of get started.
Yep.
All right. So in terms of applications, or rather equipment, first thing is your microphone. There are a couple of different options, but just to simplify things, the two that we have used, the two that you and I are using right now, are the ATR 2100, now the 2100X, that's their newest version, and the YOTTO USB microphone. And we'll include some links to the Amazon pages for each of those. The YOTTO is a little bit less expensive. I believe it was around $70 US. I know you were in overseas, and I think you paid about 60 euro. Is that right?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So, and then the ATR 2100 was around that price for a long while. They have made some changes again. Their current model is the 2100X, and I believe that's around $120. And I think it's still a very reasonable price for it, because it's high quality. And one of the advantages to it is it does have an XLR output. Now, that is a feature that we don't generally use too much, and a lot of home users, podcasters, home recorders may not use. There's also a USB connector, so it can connect directly to your computer. But the XLR monitor will connect to an outside soundboard, and you can do some pre-amplification and mixing and adjusting. Anecdotally, from what I've heard from people who use it, the XLR quality is going to be a lot higher fidelity, higher resolution, just a little bit crisper. I think that for most purposes, for what we're discussing, the USB option there is going to be just fine, but that's part of why there is that premium attached to it. If you did want to level up, if you did want to get to an external soundboard, then you'd have that option with the 2100X.
Yep, and the only thing I'll note there, I really do like the YOTTO USB. That's the one I got recently. I really like it because it came with a lot of the other equipment that we're going to mention. It came with a stand. It came with a pop filter, a windscreen. It came with pretty much everything I would need to use it right outside the box. So that made it really nice just to be able to set up. I mean, I was starting over. I left everything I had back home. If I knew the pandemic was going to happen and COVID would happen, I would have brought this stuff with me. I would have packed an extra bag. But I left my ATR mic at home, and I had to change things up. But I liked it because it came all together. I knew the mic was going to fit. It has this, I'm not sure what you call that, basically the no bump, or it has a setup in this, even if you bump or hit things, it shouldn't make like a big sparking noise or anything like that.
Right.
It's just to kind of, every little thing you could do to get the audio a little bit cleaner will go a long way in terms of having everything be professional. We'll talk a little bit more about the tools later on, the other tools, but like I said, I just like this one because it came everything together and it just made it easy. One purchase, good reviews. I'm done. I'm ready to go.
Yep. Yeah, that's been my experience as well with the ATR. I did a little bit of consumer research beforehand, found it, and I've had no issues since. So as you mentioned, Jordan, the next thing here is a pop filter and a stand. So you'll want something. A pop filter is going to help reduce the sound of plosives and pops on your audio recording, and then some sort of stand, something that is going to either be like a boom arm that can move and adjust about, or just a tripod stand or an upright stand. Any of those options are fine. You can kind of research, figure out what works for you, but you'll want something that's going to keep it in place because you don't want to have to hold the microphone, right against your chin for the duration of your recording. That is going to be tiresome and probably change the quality of the audio recording versus something that's stable that you don't have to control in that way.
Yeah, my only note about the stand is I think the boom mic stands look pretty cool when you can move them around, and also it really does help to have it. You can kind of have it set up and then push it out of the way when you're done. So if you have minimal space, that can help you too. And again, the quality wise, it's not going to be something on. It's not necessarily on the table or directly on the table that you're working from. And as weird as that is, that can make a big difference if you are moving around while you talk. If I was bumping this table, you're not going to hear it as much as if, as opposed to if I had a regular stand where it was like kind of on the table, it would be different.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. It's, it can be very helpful for all of those reasons. In terms of, pricing, pop filter you can get for $8 to $10, maybe $15, a stand, a boom microphone. Actually, I think I have one here, which I'm not using, and I'll kind of just show it on camera, so something like this, and then and it'll mount over to your desk, and something like that might go for $20 or $30. But again, if you get something like the YOTTO USB microphone, it has all of that included, and that can be an advantage there. So kind of one-stop shop. I'm not very particular on it. There are some people out probably that have strong opinions and preferences, but I would say just do your own research and figure out what you like. But I do recommend each of those tools because they will be helpful. Yep. Moving on, the next thing I wanted to mention, a dynamic versus compressor microphone. So a compressor microphone is generally going to be a little bit more sensitive and is considered higher quality in certain respects. However, for the purposes of home recording, for making your own podcasts, for making your own audiobooks, I really like the dynamic microphone. That's what the ATR 2100 is. That's what the YOTTO is. And basically, it will pick up what's immediately in front of it and less of what's on the sides and behind the microphone. The advantage there is if you don't have a sound-controlled studio, if you don't have access to thoroughly noise dampening features in your recording environment, then you're likely to get a higher quality sound from a dynamic microphone as opposed to a condenser, which is going to pick up all sorts of ambient room noise, environmental noise that can be difficult to, one, control, and then two, to edit out afterward. It depends on what you're looking for, but for our purposes, again, a dynamic microphone I would recommend in most cases if you're just starting out. Sometimes I think it's also called a Cardioid microphone, but anyway, I'll include that term below. But a dynamic microphone is my recommendation. So again, the purpose here, if you're just starting out, you don't want to have to do all this research, get one of these two mics that we mentioned, and just a basic stand, and get a dynamic microphone. If you're looking at other ones, that can help reduce your choices and make things a little bit simpler to get started.
Yep.
All right, so moving on to recording here. First thing to mention, room setup is key to the quality of your recording. So you'll want some sort of space. The primary danger, I would say, is reverb, some sort of echoey sounds. If you're doing it in the middle, if you're recording in the middle of an empty hallway, you can think about the sort of sound quality that you'll have, as opposed to some sort of pro studio, something with foam around the walls and or eggshell cartons or something like that. Basically, you want a warmer sound, a sound where your voice is not going to bounce across multiple flat surfaces of the environment, and that is going to be easier on the ears for the listener, and make things a lot smoother. Thoughts on that, Jordan?
Yeah, worth mentioning, for my last two books, Volcanic Momentum and The Balance Point, I recorded the books using the ATR microphone and the setup, but I recorded them in my walk-in closet at my old apartment. And I had a setup in my office with, the what do you call them? The things of the bass traps. Yeah, I haven't used it in a while. Bass traps up in the corner. The office was okay. It was just a little bit bigger. There was a little bit more reverb. Perfect. It's fine for podcasts and live videos and such. But when you think audiobook, I was like, I want to get as good a quality as I can. And it's crazy how much better the sound was in there. So if you don't have the money to invest in bass traps and getting your studio set up to condense that sound, you can just walk into a closet, because especially a closet filled with clothes that's small, the sound doesn't have anywhere to go, so it feels deep. And all of the equipment that you have, that's the other thing I wanted to note. I think, and you can tell me whether you agree with this or not, Rob. I think this part is even more important than the equipment. You can record something on your phone if you're in a good space and it's a good phone, and it could potentially sound better than if you're in a big room with a really expensive mic. So you could spend hundreds of dollars on a mic, but if the room quality isn't good, it's still going to sound a little bit not as good as it could be.
Yep.
I don't know. Does that sound right to you? It
does. It does sound right to me. It's really amazing how far cell phones in particular have come in terms of both audio and video quality. The main thing I would say is test it out beforehand. And we'll cover a little bit of that coming up here, but do your recordings and make sure that you are satisfied with the quality of them. And if it's working and it's something that's consistent and repeatable, then feel free to use it. Use the tools that you have. I do think it's important to be discerning with your own ear, to be your own, tough critic. Think of whether your paying customer is going to be satisfied with what you're producing, or if you're saying in the back of your head, you know what, maybe I could do a little bit better. Maybe if that's the case, follow that intuition and work on tweaking things and adjusting it. I will mention one other thing. If you do use your phone as a microphone, it's important to have some sort of consistency in the recording as well. One of the advantages of having a boom mic and a setup like that is you can ensure relatively consistent quality across recording sessions. Whereas if you're holding your microphone, to your face and trying to record it, maybe your arm starts to get tired and moves further, and so the voice sounds more or less distant or more or less proximate to it. All of those things can vary. So as much as you can automate of that process, I would advise doing that so that you do have a clean and consistent pattern across the entire recording, because it is possible. You'll have chapters 1 through 3 sound one way, and then you'll notice chapter 4, 5, and 6 sound a different way, and then 7, 8, and 9 maybe sound more like 1 and 2. It can vary, and so being consistent is going to be very helpful for recording, and to whatever extent that you can, try to recreate your recording environment.
No, I think that is a fantastic point, Rob. And I think, that's really good. I think consistency there is key. Because you think about just if you're listening to an audiobook, do you want to notice? Do you want to feel like the narrator went somewhere else to read you chapter 10 and then maybe came back home for chapter 11? You don't want to feel that jarring nature. So even if the quality isn't 100% what you want, if it's consistent, then it's probably fine.
Yeah,
so
yeah, I agree. Absolutely. So moving forward, another part of consistency, practice your delivery. Particularly if you've never recorded before, I would advise everybody to read through your book aloud, maybe for friends or family, but if not, just for yourself, at least once through, because you want to get a sense of, one, what the physical toll is going to be. It is tiresome. It can be difficult to record for more than an hour, maybe 2 hours, 3 hours if you're pretty well trained. And so depending on the length of your book, you may be looking at multiple recording sessions, and you may need to allocate a little bit of additional time for repair, sort of restoring your breath and resting your mouth and your throat, and feeling a little bit better from time to time or from session to session. There are people who are able to get it done all at once, and that's great. But I would advise certainly give it a read through beforehand. The other advantage too is you'll have a chance to get a sense of pacing, where you're at in the book. If you want to modulate your delivery at all, if you have a chance to practice that beforehand, rather than when you're in the recording studio or in your makeshift studio, then you can have a better experience of it and provide a better listener experience.
Yeah, and I would say, yeah, if you want someone to bounce it off, reach out to us. We'd be happy to do that. I mean, I'd be happy to give a listen and give some potential feedback on that. I remember you did that for me, Rob, when I was first recording. I sent you a little short snippet, and you were like, actually, you need to watch out for you're pronouncing your P's pretty intensely, and it's just things like that you don't notice when you're talking. But on an audiobook, it's going to sound pa pa pa, and that's not going to sound as good someone listening to it. So yeah, definitely the earlier you can get feedback and then implement that, the you're going to save yourself time.
Yep, absolutely. Let's see. Next note here. It is easier to get the recording right than to clean it up post-production. That's generally going to be the case almost in all situations. So again, the more you're able to practice, the more you're able to get your recording situation consistent and reliable across recording sessions, the better it's going to be. There's still going to be post-production work, and people who are really talented and skilled in post-production can do a lot with a recording. You can be surprised at the beginning and the before and after, but there's only so much that you can do, and it's much easier to modulate the initial recording and to really hone that in and get that as close to quality as you can, rather than hope that, oh, okay, we'll just fix that in post. It may work or it may not, and again, we just advise using as much care and attention as you can initially, so that you have an easier time once you get to the editing stage.
Yep. Cool.
One other thing I'll note here, punch and roll versus continuous recordings. You can read up about these. There are people who are diehards of kind of either style. Actually, I'm not even sure if it's considered continuous recording. That's kind of just the way I've referred to it. The difference is if you continuously record, then you're not hitting stop on your recording session and then going back and replacing it. So let's say you mispronounce a word. If you're doing punch and roll, what you would do is you'd stop, you'd punch it, you'd roll it back, and then start recording again, from the last clean point. The advantage theoretically to this is that you have an easier time with editing afterward. You're able to have a more or less clean production in the end, rather than one big file that you have to kind of go back and listen to, 3 or 4 different takes of. The trade-off is, if you're not as savvy with your recording equipment, with your editing equipment, that time could take you a little bit of that could be a little bit tedious. Take some additional time when you're recording. It can also potentially bring you out of the recording if you're continually going in, scanning the editing software back a little bit and doing all of that. If you haven't kind of reached a point where that's muscle memory already, then it can be a little bit difficult. Again, I just wanted to mention it. The continuous recording pattern would be, and this is what we advise authors that we've worked with, people who record their own, authors who record their own audiobooks. Record, if you notice that there is an error, just say something like redo or retake. Some people do other little sound indications so that there is an audio signature or an acoustic signature there. I've heard of people snapping their fingers, or one of our narrators will go boop and make a sort of sound like that. So there are different things that you can do to notice where those errors are and go in and clean it up in post. But there are a couple of different strategies. Figure out what works for you and see what you like.
Yeah, the only thing I have to comment on there, Rob, is definitely when you're recording, making those little boop or clapping or snapping your fingers is really helpful, because as you'll see if you test out Audacity, you can zoom out and you can see the waveforms. And if you see a waveform that is really expanded, oh, what happened there? Oh, maybe that's something I need to fix. So potentially at the end, when you're getting done your chapter, you can look just to make sure you don't have any of those. Versus thinking, I need to listen through this whole thing again to make sure. And we definitely recommend that. Do your proofreading and proof listening and making sure it's good. But yeah, that can just help you notice those errors, as opposed to if you just say, oh, I messed up again. Well, you don't want that to be in your audiobook, even if it's okay for you to say that, but yeah, mark it somehow.
Right. So what I'll do, actually, since you mentioned it, we'll pull up Audacity here and we'll kind of start the screen share, and we'll go over what's involved. Let's see. And we're going to pull that up. So this is a sample recording. It is raw and unfinished. We haven't done any editing to it. It's just me, I think, literally saying recording. But as you can see, there is an acoustic pattern. There is a visual pattern as well to these sound waves. And so, if you see something like this, maybe that's normal voice recording, and then you see something with a loud sort of signature like this, it might be what you're describing, Jordan, when you're clapping or snapping or making some sort of indication to tell you, hey, there's something going on there. Pay that extra attention when you're going back in. So anyway, let's move on real quick. The last part of recording is bonus. There is an extra manuscript proofread. If you're recording your own your own audiobook, then you have a chance to notice any additional errors or changes or updates that you might want to make. You may have noticed that there is a missing comma or a misspoken word or a misspelled word somewhere. So when you're going through this whole process, you have an opportunity to provide one more level of proofread or check for your written work as you're creating the audio work.
Yep, and when I've done this, I've found, from the last two books, I've found errors in 2 errors out of every chapter. That was kind of the mark, which to me was crazy because this book was already edited and already proofread, and I had already read through it. And you're always going to find errors. That's just what, there's always going to be proofing errors. But it was amazing how reading it out loud, oh, that's not right, but it's, our brains just fix things. Right. Reading it out loud it enabled me to stop and fix that, and it was a great final proofread. It gives you a lot. I think it's just important to have confidence in your book. To me, it just gives me even more confidence that, hey, I've really done the best I can do here, and that's really important, as you go forward and try to market it, to be done and to feel like you're good to go.
Yeah, I agree. It's a added layer of security, added layer of comfort and professionalism that you're able to add when you're incorporating in this additional round. So right on there. All right, moving on. We have editing. So there's a lot to editing. I will point you in the audience to a couple of resources. One is, and they're both going to be down below in the description here. One is a book, which is available on Amazon, but you can download it for free. It's archangelinc.com/audible. It's a book that was put together 6 or 7 years ago, but it outlines the basic editing process. So this is actually, I created it as a training module when I was training some outside help who hadn't worked with Audacity before. And so that's kind of the spirit of it. And you get a sense with lots of screenshots of, what's involved, what it looks like, how to go through various stages of the process. So highly recommend checking that out. It's a downloadable PDF, again, totally free. Or if you'd like to purchase it on Amazon, you're welcome to do that. I think it's only 99 cents. But I will include that link there. And that kind of outlines the whole editing process. There's a lot to it, and as you practice, you'll get better. Again, I think the big thing for me as I was learning was keeping in mind the listener experience and trying to create something that if I were listening to it would not distract me. My goal really is to get out of the way of the content of the story so that people are not thinking, oh wow, here he goes breathing in deeply again, or what's that clicking sound, or why do I hear an ambulance in the background, or something like that. What my goal has always been, hey, let the content speak for itself, and the audio element is just a vehicle to deliver that. And with some practice, you can start to get good at it and figure out that side of it. It will take some time if you haven't done it before, but it is learnable.
Yep.
All right, so there we go. I mentioned that, archangelink.com/audible for a free download. I also have a video. It is actually one of the highest rated videos that I have, how to master an audiobook for Audible. I include a link below, and I kind of talk it out and I demonstrate, spend about 10 or 15 minutes kind of going through. Unfortunately, you're not able to hear what I'm hearing on the audio. I just hadn't gotten that sort of technical side of it worked out, but you can kind of see what it looks like in real time as you're going through and what's involved and how to make those changes. And I'm narrating over it. So I would encourage you, if you're starting out in the editing process, definitely check that out. It is how to master an audiobook for Audible, and that's only partly true. I'll get to that in a minute. Mastering is another aspect to it. It's more editing, but that's just what it was labeled. And coming up now, editing versus mastering versus engineering. So the editing is the part that we're talking about here. Let's say I record a sentence, say, hi, my name is Rob Archangel, and I live in, and fumble my words. Hi, my name is Rob Archangel, and I live in Florida, and so the editing part would be taking out where I had that error and then leaving only behind the part that I want to have on the finished recording. That's the simplest way I can kind of demonstrate what editing is. Mastering is going to be making sure that the file is meeting all of the specifications of your in this case Audible Creation Exchange or Findaway Voices, whatever your audiobook provider requires in terms of their technical demands, making sure that you meet that. So when you're exporting it at the appropriate bit rate, exporting it at the appropriate kilohertz project rate, exporting it with the appropriate noise floor and the appropriate decibel levels and so forth. So that's kind of the mastering side of it. Engineering is almost interchangeable with that, but I've heard somebody who does a lot of audiobook editing and mastering, and she described engineering more as sort of high level equalization and adjusting things like background tone across different recording sessions. So I would say it's much finer details, adjusting to a very specific set, or usually a tighter set of parameters, whereas mastering in this case is just, hey, we need it in MP3 format at 192 kbps, send it over. And that's kind of how I conceptualize it. If anybody out there has experience with audio engineering or mastering and has thoughts on that, I'm happy to hear your feedback and what your thoughts are. But that was the distinction as it was explained to me, and that made sense.
Good deal.
All right. Moving on to the mastering and file rendering stage here. So I will include a link to the ACX Submission Requirements. I believe they are identical, or at least congruent with the Findaway submission requirements. So if you're making it available for one, it should be accepted by the other. Again, we'll include some links to those down below. I would say that the most common errors that we see are incorrect MP3 bit rate and project rate. So now that I'm over here, and I'll just kind of demonstrate, when you're exporting, assuming let's say you've got the file ready and you're good to go, you would go to File, Export as MP3, and actually I don't know if this is going to pop up here. Let's see, I might need to change my screen share window, and there we go. And then you would, and then you would select your quality. 192 kbps is the minimum. Audacity allows you to go up to 320 or down to 8 kilobits per second. And the higher your bit rate mode, the larger the file size is going to be. 192 is a reasonable rate that Audible has determined that does not sacrifice audio quality too much, but also doesn't create file sizes that are extraordinarily large and unwieldy for their purposes and for the customer's purposes. So you have the option as well. You can choose something like variable or average. What we want here is going to be constant. So we'll demonstrate in just a minute here some of what would happen if you get any of this wrong using a tool called ACX Audio Lab, which I will also pull up. But that's one element to it. I'll pull up.
And Robert, you might be we might be jumping into this, but but it might help just to show some of the basic features. Like if someone was looking at this for the first time and saw those waveforms, can you highlight, delete, move stuff around? I mean, is that pretty easy to do on there?
Absolutely. Let's go through and demonstrate some of that. So pulling this back up.
And like you said, there's a ton of features, but I think just the basics.
Yeah. So the basic features you'll see along the top row, depending on how the screen is set up, a number of different elements here. There's the pause, play, stop, and then you can kind of move forward and backward across tracks. But if you play, let's say you start here in the beginning. I don't know if any of that came through. Did you hear any of that, Jordan?
I can't hear it on my end.
Okay, yeah, so it's just coming through on my headphones, and it's really just me saying recording. Yeah. But you can do a number of different things here. So if I wanted to cut off this first section, say, no, I don't want that, highlight it, and then hit the delete key or backspace key. If I say, oh, no, I accidentally deleted something I didn't want to, how can I fix that? I would go to Edit and Undo Delete, or Control Z or Apple Z, depending on your feature here. You have a chance, let's say, hey, that sounded really good. I want to repeat that for some reason. Maybe it's an important point in the book. So you would go to Edit, Copy, and then you can paste it. I'm just using the shortcut Control V or Command V. And then you have it reproduced. You can, if I wanted to continue recording, let's say, all right, that's good up to that point. Let's start recording again. I hit the recording button and it is, well, that's not letting me record actually for whatever reason right now, but you would hit that recording button and that is what's going to give you access to it. You have a number of different tools up here. The cursor tool is the one that I use. It's this little eye-shaped tool and allows me to kind of locate where in the waveform, where in the file I want to work. You have other features as well. You can zoom in and zoom out. So if you have a very long recording and you zoom out, you can see, all of the 5-second recording here in this very small space. And obviously you can see up to, let's say 35 seconds. If you keep making it smaller, it'll get successively larger in terms of what's visible, or you can zoom in. Maybe there's something really particular and you're trying to get out some little bit of background sound. And so you want to zoom in and it's going to be, you're looking at the hundredths of a second or even further. And you can kind of adjust it at a very fine and granular level. So those are some of the basic tools. Audacity, again, is a really cool program. Are there other things that you think I should kind of cover as we're given this big intro?
I don't think anything else. I was just going to share that in my perspective, for someone that jumped into this for the first time, it was helpful for me to think of it akin to word processing in some ways. Because okay, I'm looking at these blue waveforms. What can I do with that? Well, yeah, you can cut, copy, paste. Change things around. Type stuff in, which means just put a new recording in. Right. Move stuff around, place stuff in different places. So just thinking about, anything you could record here is manipulable. I mean, you could take half of that and you could put the end at the beginning. Not that you want to do that, but you have the option in here to move stuff around and copy and paste and change as you see fit.
Right. So I'll just demonstrate. If I wanted to do that, I wanted to move this end to the beginning. So we'll cut it, Control X, and then we'll paste it, Control V, and there we are. And let's say, oh, I want some additional space here. I want some additional dead air. Let's take a little section of dead air that we have from elsewhere. We'll copy that, and then we'll paste it in here. And maybe we can paste it, paste it multiple times into there, because maybe you want some additional dead space so that thought can breathe, or you can give the reader a chance to catch up with what you're communicating. But I love that description, Jordan, thinking of it as almost a word processor but the words in this case are audio files, and cutting and pasting and adjusting in all of that way. So great.
And I feel like there are probably audio engineers out there that hate that I said that, but since we have an audience full of authors that may not necessarily use this stuff, like I said, for me it was helpful because I hadn't used this stuff before. So
right. Yep. No, I agree. All right, let's move on here. Let's see if we can pull up the next thing. So some useful Audacity tools that we use often, and we cover these again in that tool there, or excuse me, that downloadable file, archangelinc.com/audible. Noise reduction is one, and then some other ones which are, well, Limiter I think is built in, but RMS Normalize is one more, and ACX Check. Those are both external plugins which you can download and install separately. But what noise reduction does, you would take, let's go ahead and demonstrate actually just for the purpose of here. So we'll go to Effect and then Noise Reduction. And unfortunately, it's not showing this very readily here. Let's
yeah, it's not popping up the menus for some reason.
Yeah, let's I'm going to go ahead and change the share screen and share.
So while you're doing that, Rob, one thing I want to mention that, noise reduction, you'll see in a second what it looks like. But when you're thinking about it, you really want to use it very sparingly. And I'm sure Rob gets into this in his mastering video. But when you're thinking of sharing mistakes that I've made in taking out certain things, and if I take my own breath while I'm recording and I say, hey, I want to reduce the sound of my breath like in between, well, that doesn't really work, because if you think about it, your breath sounds, you do breathe while you're talking. It's a very interesting thing. But if you just think about if you're going to do a noise reduction, it's you really have to just do it sparingly and then listen to the audio after, because you could potentially be losing out there. Especially if you're doing a small change to your entire audiobook, to the entire chapter, it can be very sensitive. And then you can end up with a more tinny and just a hollow kind of not natural sound at all. So just watch out for that. And if you do use the noise reduction and try to get rid of certain things, just listen to the audio afterward and make sure it didn't mess everything up. Because like I said, I've done that. So
yes, as have I. We had a project which we didn't realize we applied the noise reduction uniformly across an entire recording. It turns out that the narrator recorded in different studios from one section to the latter half, and so the second half of the audio sounded awful, and we didn't realize for whatever reason, and it was submitted to ACX and rejected, and we had to very quickly redo. I think it was a 4 or 5 hour production, and it was an all hands on deck kind of experience. The other audio engineer, audio worker, editor that I was working on this project with. So yeah, it is something that it can be misapplied. And some people, I've gotten comments on YouTube videos or in, just feedback in general saying, don't ever use noise reduction. It's a terrible idea. So I've been fortunate. It's worked out reasonably well for me. Whether that's because I have been able to discern when I've used just the right amount and not gone further, or maybe I've just gotten lucky with the recordings that I have. It is something to be mindful of. So I'll show it here just for the sake of demonstration, but it is a tool that you may hear some strong criticism about, and I would apply you to be very judicious about it if you use it at all.
The only short thing I'll mention with that, Rob, for me, I found that you can use it. But yeah, like we said, be careful, but think about it in terms of if it's a human sound, if it's something your voice made, don't use noise reduction.
Right.
But if it's like a squeaking, or maybe your mic did a weird thing, I found that's fine, because it's probably not affecting, the good audio of you talking through the rest of the thing. But yeah, if it's a human sound, don't use it for it. But if it's an outside sound, that's what I've found. I'm sure there's cases where it still could mess up, but yeah, again, just be careful.
Right. And to backtrack just a moment, I'll explain the whole idea of noise reduction is you have something that you're providing a noise profile of, and I'm kind of demonstrating here. So we'll get the noise profile, it'll take it. And then you go once again to effects and let's see, noise removal or noise reduction. And then you apply it across the entire, section of the recording. Obviously, this is only a few seconds, so it did it almost instantly. Other times it may render and take a moment or a minute or two. But the idea is you're taking that thing that you took a sample of that you want to remove. It's taking it more or less unilaterally out. It's not a human ear. It's not judging, oh, well, that sounds like it probably should be there, so we're going to leave it be. It is based entirely on the audio profile of it. So like you mentioned, Jordan, if it is a squeaking chair, or you're knocking on your desk or something like that, then removing something with that distinct noise profile might not be a big deal. But if it is your own speaking, then let's say you take out, you use a 5-second clip of your own voice, then it's going to remove everything throughout the whole track with your voice making those kinds of sounds. And if you'd like to give it a shot and just kind of see and get a sense, I would recommend doing that. Actually, take a sample of actual recorded text, something that you wouldn't necessarily want to remove, but use that as your noise profile on a file that you haven't saved or that you've opened up in a separate window. I don't want to damage your only recording, but apply it, and then you can get a sense of what it actually does. So anyway, noise reduction is one that you might find helpful. Another one, effect that I use somewhat frequently, amplify. And so you can reduce or increase the size of it. So as we can see, this waveform is almost all the way at the very top. So if we go ahead, if we want to make that smaller, in other words, make the sound softer, we can reduce it. And let's say we reduce it by 5, and you'll see the waveform changes just like that. So that's important. Another thing that we can use, which I find helpful, is the limiter. Usually I set it to hard limit, and there are decibel limits. Right now I have it set to -2.75. I believe it's -3, which is the max for ACX's purposes. Mm-hmm. But that's just the setting that I have it set at, and that seems to work reasonably well. So what this will do, let's see if it applies. This file is not going up high enough, but let's bring it back. So I just hit undo a couple of times. Let's go ahead and limit it, and I'll show you just kind of what it looks like when we set a hard limit at -2.75 decibels, and you'll see no part of the waveform will extend past there. So it just kind of removed the high ends of that waveform. So that's kind of what the limiter does. And when you're trying to meet specification, that can be really helpful. So again, let's go back. And
yep, and you would use those when you're finishing up, Rob, when you're like finished doing all your cutting and pasting and listening through. Is that when you would use those?
Correct. So the first thing that I would do, actually, and maybe we should have started with this, but since we're here, we'll go to it. And it is something called RMS Normalize. Now, this is a user-created plugin, and it is something that I don't think Audacity has built in, but it works pretty well. And so you have a chance. You can change your target RMS level, and I believe it's between 19 and 23 that is required for ACX. And you can kind of set it, go to these various different places. I, had it set to 21. That seemed to be, right in the middle. That works reasonably well. Independently, stereo channels, that would apply if we were doing a stereo recording versus a mono recording. I generally recommend mono recordings, and so you can see a little bit more about that in the PDF that I mentioned here. But let's apply it, and you'll see it changes the waveform almost entirely. So what that is it's basically a median or a mean setting for the noise level. What you don't want as an audiobook listener is for the audiobook to be really, really soft and then really loud, and kind of modulate up and down. So when you normalize when you use this RMS normalize function, then you're going to create a more consistent, more even tone throughout. So the places where it tends to be a little bit high, it will lower. The places where it tends to be a little bit low, it may raise up, just to help meet your demands. Finally,
yeah, I think that's great because it just makes it more professional. I've listened to podcasts even recently where one person's talking and I have to turn the volume up Someone else jumps in, and all of a sudden I have to turn it down because my ears are splitting.
Right.
Audible, and and if you want your audiobook to sound professional, you too really care about that. Again, use your experience there.
Right.
And if it's going to go up and down, I mean, it's annoying to just have to turn your volume up and down. So that's the reason that those plugins exist. So you can just make it sound better in the end. And
yeah, and if you don't meet those certain parameters, there is some variability and some flexibility that ACX affords. But if you don't meet those parameters, then your file will be rejected. And so it's not even a matter of be nice to your audience. If ACX says, hey, you didn't do it, then they're not going to let you even access your audience.
Yeah, good point. Good reminder there.
Yeah. So finally, we've got ACX check. This is a very cool and useful tool. And there we go. It will actually tell you if it passes all of these parameters: peak level, RMS level, your noise floor, and then right there, clip meets ACX requirements. It will also tell you the full length of it and the sample rate that you are working with, the project ratio sample rate. So
yeah, much better to know that at this point, so you can go and adjust, versus thinking you're done and then getting that email that you have to re-upload and change things. And maybe it's been several weeks and I don't know where I put that file or know where I saved that. Yeah, right. It's just a great plugin because it's not 100%, I don't think, and they don't guarantee that. But I mean, I think it's pretty close to, if you get that check mark, okay, I'm going to feel pretty good about uploading this and having it pass.
Right, and we'll get to this in a minute. Another tool that we can use, which is ACX Audio Lab. But what I've found is that actually ACX Audio Lab seems to be a little bit more permissive than even the ACX check. So I've not yet come across any file that passed the ACX check but did not meet Audio Lab's requirements. However, I have seen some that did not pass ACX check, which Audio Lab in turn approved. So this might have slightly tighter tolerances, which isn't a bad thing, and might just ensure that you have it really dialed in. So I've gone back, I've removed that RMS normalize function, and I'm just going to demonstrate. So we do the ACX check, and here's the information that we have. Monotrack properties, the peak level exceeds the parameters, the RMS level exceeds the parameters, the noise floor is adequate, it passes the parameters, but in general, the main thing, it fails to meet ACX requirements. So you'll know that, again, as you're mentioning, Jordan, you'll have an opportunity to get it right now before you end up having to mess with uploading. In the past, before ACX Audio Lab existed, you would upload it, you'd hope everything that went right and you didn't have any issues, and you'd submit it because the submission process can take several weeks. You might get an email a week later when one of their engineers gets to it and says, "Oh, sorry, unfortunately, these files have issues. Please correct them." And then your whole project is delayed, let's say a week or more, however much longer it may take you to go in and actually adjust those files and then re-upload them and so forth. So let's see. Moving on, mentioned here. So since it is next, ACX Audio Lab, let's talk about that. We've got another screen here. So this is the Audio Lab screen. You have to have an ACX account there, but what you can do is just upload files right to it. And I've uploaded, so this is a sample that's been mastered. It's gone through the appropriate editing and mastering process, and yep, 0 issues found in 0 files. However, let's say you want to use that raw file, right? And you haven't done anything to it. You upload it, and in a moment here, it'll show you that it actually does not pass this test. And yeah, it's taking its time. So there are a couple of things that that was incorrect about it. The kilobits per second, the bit rate was off, and the peaks were off. And they actually provide guidance on how to adjust those things. They have an encoding guide for further information. But let's see. So let's say I accidentally saved as a WAV file. WAV files are nice. They're higher fidelity. They're not compressed. So for your own purposes, for your master recordings, you might want to save those WAV files. But let's say I try and upload it to Audio Lab. Nope. Immediately we get the sign, sorry, we do not support that file type. Please upload a valid MP3 file. So it won't even let you do that. Here's another example. I uploaded or I exported that file using a variable bit rate rather than a constant bit rate. And it told me, nope, it is at 79 bits apparently, and with a variable bit rate. So, these are some of the examples of different error messages that you might get. And again, they have resources on how to adjust them. One more, let's see. What if, I'll pull this up here over in Audacity. So the project rate, this is something that by default is set to 44.1, at least it was when I received or when I opened the application. But I have seen files come in occasionally at 48 kilohertz and 48,000 hertz. And if that's the case, you might not even notice. The file might look totally fine, and then you'll upload it. Oh no, it's actually the wrong sample rate. And so you can adjust that. It's fairly straightforward, actually. If you have this at 48 kilohertz, let's see. Actually, we'll open this up in Audacity, and I will demonstrate. So here is that file, and we have sample rate 44.1. So just demonstration purposes, again, we will export as an MP3 at 44.1. We have it set at constant 192 kbps, and we'll call this file corrected. And here's another part of it. You can import, or you can manually put in your metadata tags if you like, your artist name, track title, album title, so forth. Because ACX and Findaway Voices, they actually strip all that metadata away and include their own. I generally don't. I leave this totally clear, but we can just put on some, that if you'd like, just fill it in, or again, hit that clear button, it'll take it away. So we say, okay, it goes about its recording process. It has finished exporting, and we will drag this over the corrected file, and we should find out that everything is actually just fine according to ACX Audio Lab. So this is a very cool tool. Again, you do need to have an ACX account to access this. There we go, no issues found. So you have to sign in, and it's not something that you can use without an account, but an account is free to set up. If you have a KDP account, you can use your same credentials and access Audible Creation Exchange, ACX. So there we go.
Yeah, Rob, I could see that. I'm just thinking here. I could see that being particularly useful, even if you weren't editing your own audiobook. Say you recorded yours and you sent it off and had someone else mastering and editing and doing all that work for you. And if you were doing your own uploading, you could pop it in there real quick because maybe you haven't gone into Audacity yourself or haven't messed with it yourself. It's much better to find out real quick, hey, is the file I got from my engineer, my person, going to pass these tests? Right. I can see that being extremely beneficial, again, to save yourself time and not have to go through that review process again. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure there are other uses for it as well. I was just thinking that while you were showing it.
And I'll include a link. It should be down below into the announcement that Audible has issued about their Audio Lab and the functionality that it has, and any plans that they have for it. But yeah, I think it's a very cool tool and something certainly worth looking at. Or taking advantage of, as long as you're doing this. And again, like you said, Jordan, even if you didn't do it yourself, if you just want to do one more final check with your engineer or your editor, then this is a way to do that, and just make sure everything is good.
Yep.
All right. So moving on here, and we'll try and wrap this up. Platforms. So we've mentioned ACX. ACX is a good one. And then Findaway Voices is another. Findaway makes it available to a number of other distribution channels. ACX makes your book available to audible.com, amazon.com, and the iTunes bookstore. And that's it. But if you have a non-exclusive arrangement with them, you can make it available through Findaway Voices to a number of other channels, including libraries and other research institutions where people can download them, can rent them through their library, but you actually do earn commissions for those. So it's a nice way to make your book available, in some cases, for free to a listening audience without them having to purchase it, but you do get a little bit of a kickback, and that is they're a great provider. I certainly recommend them, and would encourage looking into them if you are interested in going non-exclusive with ACX. And wrapping up, let's see. Audio questions, leave them below. We covered a lot here, and I really thought we were going to get in around 30 minutes, but we're almost at an hour. We're almost at an hour, but I hope that this demonstration has been useful in kind of talking it out. And let us know if you found this useful, and if you have any issues, any trouble, if you're running into anything, with some quandary you're struggling with, we have produced, gosh, man, I think Archangel Ink has done 150 audiobooks, something like that. So, and I've been, kind of quality control for just about all of them, the kind of final proofing or so forth, for at least a vast majority of them. So I've seen a lot of different things. I may not have seen your issue, but if you're coming across something, there's a decent chance that I have, and so I'm happy to help. Jordan's also edited and or proofed dozens, I think, of our audiobooks. Mm-hmm. So you've done audiobooks of your own as well. You've done narrating of your own. So we've got a reasonable bit of experience here, and we're happy to provide some input if you are struggling. Anything else you wanted to say on these on that, Jordan?
Nope, I would just second that again, like we mentioned earlier. If you want to email us and connect with us, and I'd be happy to take a look at your initial audio and just to see. I think that is probably one of the best things that we could provide and could be helpful. Just provide some feedback. Hey, that sounds great. You're gonna maybe there's some things you could do there. It's hard to tell until you listen to it, until you record it and see, okay, what are we working with? But I think that's a good option before you dive in and record a whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. You can feel free to reach us through our contact form on the archangelink.com site. And we're happy to take a look. Jordan or I will, actually, I think it's a great offer, Jordan, something that we're willing to do. And just check it out. I would say a sample, no more than 2 or 3 minutes. Please don't send us your full 75-minute audiobook or your unedited 300-minute, audio file. But 2 or 3 minutes, just you getting in there, giving us a sense of what it would really look like. Something, you get it as far as you can, and then we can take a look at it, and hopefully that will be of some use and value. But that's it. Good luck, everybody. We really recommend Audacity. There are a number of things to learn about it. There's a lot of different tools and approaches and ways to do all of that. Hopefully this has provided enough of an introduction and summary that you think, okay, I know what I need. I know what I need to get, and I know where to start at least. And you can begin your own process of learning audiobook production.
Good deal.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. Have a good evening, and thanks for joining us for Archangel Ink Live number 47. We'll see you next time.